Hi everyone, welcome to Woolen Spinning. My name is Rachel and I want to welcome you all here to this place. It is Thursday, September 22nd, and this is episode 38. As you may have already noticed, the show is being released one day early in the evening. I am going to switch to releasing the show on Thursday nights, and the reason for that is Friday mornings are a little bit too crazy and we kind of hit the ground running in the morning. And I thought that maybe it would be nice for the show to come out on Thursday evening when I can make sure that it's sort of everywhere that it needs to be and not be rushing in the morning trying to hit all of the public buttons that I need to hit on Friday morning. So I hope that that is okay with everyone. I have a few things that I want to talk about today. I do have a little bit of housekeeping. I have a new cast on. I have a project that I'm sort of playing with and have finally figured out what I'm going to do. So I thought I'd show it to you before I rip it out and start again. And I also have a finished object to share with you. If you remember from last week, episode 37, I was wearing that shawl and I ran out of time last week to be able to talk about it. So I thought this week I would make sure that I have time at the end to talk about that shawl and about the yarn. So let's jump right in. I will save the housekeeping to the end of the show so that for those who aren't interested, you can just say goodbye. And for the rest of you, stay tuned for information about things up and coming in the next couple of months. Okay, let me share with you my first new cast on. So I haven't put any work into my exploration station this week, and the only reason is because I've been knitting swatches and samples like crazy for a project that I'm working on. If you follow me on Instagram, you will have seen a little teaser of some of that work. There will be more information coming about that towards the end of the year. And so I've been sort of working on that. I also have the Sweet Georgia Yarns Fiber Club in progress for spinning, and I'm saving that for next week because I have quite a few things to say about that spin, and it may or may not be finished. So I'm going to save it for next week. So in the meantime, I did start something new. I have been finding, and I've talked about this on the show, that in the past, my samples of hand spun is starting to really get quite large. This is one bag. I have a whole other bag of samples. And now I'm also into these, what I call kind of mini bags of samples. And they're just piling up. And then on top of that, I have all my samples from Fiber Club that I really want to incorporate. And I've mentioned this before that I'm sort of torn about how I wanted to do this and what I wanted to start, what type of project I wanted to do. And I've been kind of waffling about it, as some of you have heard me lament on the podcast. So I was perusing Instagram, and I don't tend to sort of surf on there very much, but I was spending some time just looking through people's hashtag sock yarn blanket, that sort of search. And there were some awesome, really inspiring blankets on there. And there was one person in particular that I kept coming back to her photos of her blanket. And one of the things that really inspired me about her blanket was, as she's been building it, she lays out and takes photos of where she wants her minis to go. And what it sort of has created is this very watercolor, very fluid sort of feel of the blanket. She's working in commercial sock yarn, and of course I'm working in hand spun. So it's a little bit different in terms of color management, because some hand spun yarns you think are going to knit up one way, and then you knit the sample and you're like, well, that wasn't at all what I expected. But I did think that I could use some of her wisdom and her way of creating that aesthetic by doing that myself and laying out my skeins of samples before I start knitting. And maybe I could create a very similar feel to the blanket. So that's what I've been doing. So I started off, this is a brand new, I literally just added this square, and I started with 2 hedgehog fibers samples that I had that were combo spun with other colorways from other bobbins. And then I added this into the World sample that was Navajo plied, that was called Eating Grapes Off Wallpaper, I think. And it was a completely twisted and arbitrary spin along from a few years ago. And what I'm going to do is sort of keep laying this out as it grows and gets bigger and work on it over quite a long period of time, and hopefully create sort of a very fluid type of blanket with it. The cool thing about this is that it'll take a very, very long time to build the full blanket. I don't know what size I'm kind of thinking, but I am thinking something quite substantial and sort of in the back of my mind. And so over time, I'll be able to incorporate Fiber Club as I get to it, and the colors of the different months that work, I'll be able to incorporate as I get to them. So I'm really excited about that. This is the beginning. I have a few colors lined up that are going to be going in next that I've already sort of placed. So I have this gray that I had carded up with some Angelina that's going to go in over here somewhere. I have this combo spin from Sweet Georgia that I did for the Sweet Georgia Yarns book that's coming out in the new year. And I also have this Sweet Georgia Yarns club fiber that was Panorama that I Navajo plied the last little bit off of my bobbins with, and it's going to go somewhere in here. So you can see how I'm just going to sort of slowly place the different colors and sort of hopefully create this sort of watercolor effect. We'll see how it goes. It may blow up in my face and not work at all. I think I'm showing you the back side. I didn't mean to. But that's how it's very, very early stages. I'm not going to show this to you every week. I'll show it to you as I build it out. And there may be times when I don't work on it at all. I don't know. I'm hoping to do 1 square a day. That's sort of my plan. And I'm knitting this on 2.75 millimeter needles, so it'll be quite a tight gauge. And I'm only using samples of hand spun that are between a fingering and a heavy sport. So I am keeping my parameters quite tight around what I'm using. So I'll keep you posted on how that goes. The next thing that I wanted to share with you was last week I showed you my finished skein of my West Coast Color and Carding Polworth mohair and silk. It came out very gray, and as you can see, it is a huge skein. I finished off with about 300 and something yards, and this is 8 ounces. I spun it quite densely. I was putting my Mach 3 through its initial sort of exercises and getting used to it. It's varying in gauge. It goes anywhere from sort of a sport weight to a light Aran weight. I did take my wraps per inch off of a few different places, and overall in general it's 8 wraps per inch, and it's quite dense. It's 700 yards per pound, and mohair is quite a heavy fiber, so that makes sense that it's a little bit more dense than I would normally spin. Because of the Polworth content, after I washed it, it really poofed up, as you saw last week. And the silk gives it a lovely sheen, as well as the mohair. And then also because of the mohair, it has a bit of a halo, which is quite lovely. So you might be wondering what I'm doing with this. I had mentioned last week that I really wanted to do a cowl with it, and that I didn't have a big infinity cowl. So I've been playing with some stitch patterns. I've ripped this out 7 or 8 times. I think last night was 8, and I finally have solidified the stitch pattern that I'm going to use. I'm not going to talk too much about the stitch pattern because this is for an upcoming project, but it's got a lovely feel to it and a lovely movement and texture without taking away from the hand spun. So the reason why I'm going to rip it out is because I started on a gauge and size of needles that I thought would work really quite well. I thought it would be a nice fabric. And the further along I got, that I felt that it was a bit too tight and a bit too dense. It would be great for a cowl that was only going to go around once and would be right up next to my face and would maybe be buttoned and would stay standing up. But what I would like is a cowl that's longer that I can double around my neck, and I'm not sure that I'm going to put buttons on it. I'm kind of on the fence about that. So I bumped up my needle size substantially from the needle size that I was using, and I decided to do a few rows and see what I thought of this new fabric that I was creating, and I like it quite a bit more. So it's a little bit more open and a little bit more, a little bit softer. It's not quite as structured as the lower fabric, and so I am actually going to rip this out and restart probably tonight. So I wanted to share it with you before I did that, and you'll see some progress on this hopefully next week. So that is that. And I'm also torn about knitting it instead of lengthwise like a scarf, I'm tempted to cast it on and knit it in the round and work the tube up. Yeah, I'm not sure about that yet. So that is that. I haven't put any time in on my lemongrass sweater. And like I said earlier, I haven't put any time in on my exploration station. I just haven't had a chance to sit down with enough quiet time to really work on it. We have a family dinner tonight with family that's in town, and I think I'm going to take it over there and work on it while the kids are playing. And I actually was going to take it this morning because we went to the lake this morning, and but I was paddling it out on the paddleboard the whole time. So I didn't get any knitting done, which is totally fine. I feel so spoiled that in the middle of September I can go out paddling. And it was actually kind of neat because my niece was there this morning, and she's the same age as Nora. She's just a couple of months older. And Nora and James were wanting to come on the board right away, and they had their PFDs on, and they're all excited, and they wanted to float around. And my niece is still a little bit timid around water. She loves it, but she's just a little bit more timid than our kids, who are totally fearless. And which is probably because I'm fearless. I just love the water so much. And we got her out there as well and sitting on the board, and she ended up wanting to go way out into the lake with Nora on the board as well. And they had their PFDs on, and I had mine on, and it was just awesome. We had such a good time. As you can see, I've had a lot of sun. Even though I was wearing sunscreen, it's still bright enough out there to burn. So, and I think a lot of it's wind. The wind was really kicking up the whole time we were out there. So it was wonderful, and I feel spoiled that we were able to do that this morning. But I didn't get any knitting done. Woe was me, right? All right, so this shawl I was wearing last week. So you've sort of seen it on me if you tuned in last week. This is the Daybreak shawl by Stephen West, and I am going to hold it up and hide my face for just a minute so that you can see the sheer size of this shawl. So it goes from here So it actually spans, when I stretch my arms out, it actually is even longer than that. It is it's huge. It's bigger than I thought that it would be. I am not complaining. For anybody who is a longtime reader of the blog or a longtime watcher of the podcast, you know how much I love oversized blanket shawls. This is a pattern from Stephen West, which I think I just mentioned, and it's called Daybreak. There are 2 sizes called for in the pattern, and I actually, once I figured out the pattern repeat through the striped section, I'll just hold it up so that you can see what I'm talking about. So through the striped section, when you start slipping the stitch that becomes your lattice down the body of the shawl, I actually stopped referencing the pattern. It's a very memorizable increase that you need to create and do to create this effect. And I knew that I wanted to knit until I ran out of yarn, and that's what I did. So I didn't create the edge and the border that is called for in the pattern. And the reason for that is because I knew that I wouldn't have enough of the dark blue and yellow, which is a bourbon, the colorway bourbon by Sweet Georgia Yarns. And I didn't want to knit any more with the tumbled stone, which is this color, than I had to. And the reason is because this, and I've talked about this on the show before, this yarn was slightly underspun, and it didn't have quite enough twist in it. And so as I was knitting with it, and as I got down into the striping section, I was getting really frustrated with it. And I did, if you remember, I did put it aside for quite a long time. As I got further and further down the shawl and towards the edging, I just thought, I just want to get this cast off. I just want to get it finished. I was running out of yarn. I have 2 little balls of it left, and I have skeined both of the balls, and I probably will use them in my blanket eventually, although I might not use the tumbled stone just because it's structurally not very sound. So if it were to start coming unraveled in the blanket, it would need a major repair. So by the time I got down to the end, I was sort of done with the shawl and wanted it to be finished, and I ended up doing a row of purl 3, knit 3 with a bead in between. On the knit 3, I knit 1, placed a bead, knit that stitch, and then knit 1 more, and then I purled 3. to create sort of a semi garter stitch row, and to weigh it down a bit with the beads, and then I cast off. My one regret with this shawl is that I used a cast off that is a relatively stretchy cast off. So it's the same cast off that I use for my socks, and it basically is knit 2, slip, and then knit 2 through the back loop. So you knit 2 stitches and then slip those 2 stitches back to your left needle, and then knit through the back loop. And of course it decreases it by 1 stitch, but you now in effect have sort of an extra stitch for every stitch that you cast off. The reason why it's my only regret is because it made for an edge that is sort of has a ruffled effect, and it was really, really, really difficult to block. And if it had been a lace shawl, or if it had had a garter stitch border with several rows of garter stitch, it would have been totally fine, because I could have just stretched it out and evened out that edge. But in the end, what sort of has ended up happening is I've ended up with a bit too much edge at the cast off edge. And for a stockinette body, I just didn't need all those extra stitches. All I needed to do was cast off with a loose bind off, maybe cast off with needles that were a size larger. So that's my only, woulda, coulda, shoulda that I had about this shawl. Other than that, I love how the colors came out. I love that there isn't really any pooling in the bourbon. It really mixed up quite well. The colors really, the repeat of the colors is very pleasing. I also didn't want to get this shawl wet, so to block it was a little bit challenging. It's a singles yarn, so the twist really needed to be set one more time in the knitted fabric. But I didn't want to dunk it in water because I was worried about the bourbon and this unbelievably concentrated dark blue running into the tumbled stone when it hit the water, particularly warm soapy water. But cold water wouldn't have set the twist like I wanted because of the tumbled stone being slightly under twisted. And so what I did in the end, and some of you will cringe, and that's totally fine, I actually took an iron to it, like a physical hot iron. And I have quite a number of old handkerchiefs that I use for pressing. And I decided to lay the shawl out section by section. And I used sort of a medium hot iron. It wasn't on its hottest setting. I put it to my wool setting on my iron, and I have a professional seamstress iron. It was quite expensive. My parents gave it to me because I used to sew a ton, and I have sort of put my sewing away for these couple of years that I'm home with the kids. So I'm hoping when the kids go to school that I'll be able to start sewing again. But because my iron has very specific heat settings, I was able to set it to wool, and I steam set it. So I actually physically placed the iron down on the ironing board on the handkerchief that was above the actual physical shawl. And it was the only way that I could get this blocked out this precisely. I don't regret it for a moment. I didn't have to worry about color running. I didn't have to worry about pinning it out, and it's so huge. I had nowhere to pin it anyways. If you are going to try using an iron on your knitwear, be very, very careful. It can damage the wool, and the heat, just the sheer heat on it can really cause problems. But putting a handkerchief in between, or a really thin piece of fabric, especially like cotton, quilting cotton, that doesn't have a lot of color itself, so you're not risking transferring that color onto your knitwear if it's a lighter color, it can be really effective, and it can work really well. The other nice thing about doing that is that it set the twist and it set the shawl, so it hasn't gone back at all in terms of like losing some of its block. And the reason for that is that the yarn is actually now permanently set in this shape. And there was a great article in Ply magazine in the singles issue talking about this phenomenon of steaming our yarns and setting the twist and how it molecularly actually changes the physical yarn itself and the wool structure itself. So if you have access to the winter of 2015 ply issue that was the singles issue, at the very back there was an article on that, and it was fascinating to read. So that is this shawl. It was Daybreak by Stephen West. It was a great pattern. I really enjoyed knitting it. It took forever. The rows were enormous towards the end. I'm incredibly happy with how it turned out. Bourbon, the colorway Bourbon, has actually been discontinued. They did have problems with the color running and not being color fast. But there are other colors out there that are similar that maybe just aren't as concentrated as Bourbon was. So if you have any other questions about this yarn and about this project, please don't hesitate to reach out and I'll be happy to answer your questions. All right, I'm getting to the end of the show and I do have a little bit of housekeeping. I will link to everything that I talk about in terms of our housekeeping for today in the show notes at wellfordpearls.com, and that way you can go and have a look if you missed something or anything wasn't clear. But basically, Fiber Club, workshops, and Combo Spin, and Combo Spin is on Patreon. These are all on patreon.com/wellfordpearls. Combo Spin is where you can combine workshops, Fiber Club, and the Thoughtful Spinner, which is an essay-based reward tier. And you can receive all of those in sort of one package each month. All of three of those things will open on October 1st. So if you're interested in joining Fiber Club, if you're interested in joining workshops, or you would like to have a combination of those things, please head over to patreon.com/wellfordpearls on October 1st. There will be limited spaces available. So if it's something that you are interested in, set your alarm for October 1st and hopefully you can secure a spot. Anybody who joins Combo Spin or the Thoughtful Spinner will also receive a dedicated page in our upcoming book that will be published sometime in the new year, a dedicated thank you page. So for anybody who participates in Combo Spin or a Thoughtful Spinner, which is another tier, you will receive a thank you from us in our upcoming book. As well, anybody who is a Patreon subscriber, even if it's only $1 a month, that helps to keep the lights on here at Wool and Spinning, and I am so thankful to those of you who have contributed thus far. There will be, before the end of the year, a drawing and a giveaway of a spinning wheel. So if you're interested in participating in that, and that is something that you would like to be able to partake in and hopefully win, please go to patreon.com/wellfordpearls. In terms of our fall clear out spin along that is happening in the Ravelry group at this time, I can't believe how much spinning you guys are doing and the photos that you've posted. I have another clear out that I'm going to start working on in the next week or so. I need to get my Sweet Georgia Club done. And after that, I'm going to start trying to get some of my bobbins cleared off because Spinzilla is around the corner. And for those of you who are participating, we need to be ready. So I hope that you are busy spinning away and getting your bobbins cleared off. We will see you over in the Ravelry group if you are participating in that spin along. I have a couple of things to announce for that spin along next week and some prizes that I'm sort of putting together that will be awarded when the spin along ends at the end of the year. And if you're interested in more and learning about more, please head over to the Ravelry group, Wool and Spinning. Until next week, I hope everybody has a wonderful spinny week, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.